Hello everyone, I hope you're all keeping well, healthy and happy. So I thought it was important to make a video talking about the latest development in the realm of gene editing. For those of you who are unfamiliar, scientists in the US and in China have successfully managed to edit the human genome in embryos. Now, there are a few people out there who have already commented on this latest development. They think it's a fantastic thing, and the argument they put forward is that, well, now we can eradicate diseases, we can eradicate disabilities that present themselves in the human genome, and thus people can live better lives, i.e. it would eradicate suffering, right? This is a very powerful argument. And it's a good argument. But here's my problem with it. And this is why I am not an eternal optimist in this respect, okay, with regards to this. Because you're assuming, using that argument, you're assuming that human beings are inherently good, that they wish to do great goodness from the get-go. You are completely ignoring the malevolence that presents itself in people, okay? We'll get into this a little bit more. But if you take a look at the atrocities which have happened through the 20th century, if you take a look at the things which are currently happening, if you take a look through human history at all the events which have happened, I cannot see any good reason for assuming that human beings are inherently good. Now, that's not to say human beings aren't good, please understand this, right? What I'm saying is that we are not born with the propensity to do goodness. That's the interesting bit about human nature, okay? Morality is something we learn. How to be sociable is something we learn. Now, we may have genetic predispositions towards either of those, but all in all, without the right precursors and the right environment, you don't become a good human being, okay? To be moral, we have to learn morality, okay? We learn morality through our lives, the mores and what we're supposed to do and what we're not supposed to do. People have to tell us these things. Otherwise, we don't know, and the proof is in the pudding. How many times have we seen human beings cross the line? Okay, how many times have we seen that? Whether it was Unit 731, the Japanese unit that was stationed in Japan during the Second World War and conducted horrendous experiments on people, or whether it was Stalin's gulags, or whether it was Hitler's death camps. How many times have we seen instances where human beings have brought out the very worst in themselves? So we have these malevolent characteristics oftentimes that do end up coming to the fore. Right? What has that got to do with gene editing, you might wonder? Well, here's the fundamental question. Who controls the technology? Is it the scientists themselves that came up with it? And how do we know that scientists will always behave ethically? Because there have been many instances, Unit 731 not being an exception, there have been many instances in which scientists have completely ignored ethics, okay, in the name of advancement, in the name of science, okay? So there is no good reason to assume that science itself has any kind of ethical or moral framework. That's the first thing. The second thing is, obviously, in order for this technology to have been developed, there must have been government grants involved. Okay, there must have been. And if governments have control to and access to this technology, again, the fundamental question is, what makes you think government has your best interests at heart? because we can see very plainly that they do not. Keep in mind, if malevolence is rooted deep in our psyches and deep in our biology, then the people that we're electing to government are equally afflicted with this problem, are they not? And furthermore, the way that government structures are set up, they're designed to benefit psychopathic behaviour. Okay, they're designed to give an advantage to psychopaths. So the question again is, what makes you think that the government would have your best interests at heart? And we can see proof in the pudding. Because if you take a look at the actions of various governments in the Western world over the last 2 years, what have they been doing? Well, they are in favour of making people dependent entirely on them. They are in favour of increasing and expanding in size. They are in favour of infinite debt. They are in favour of bringing in massive numbers of undocumented people who are uneducated and illiterate. Why, you might wonder, would they do that? Well, it's quite simple. Because at their core, what they want is power and control, as any megalomaniac individual or system might want. Okay? So if you've got these people in positions of power, whether it's the government, whether it's the banking industry, whether it's the military-industrial complex, and the military-industrial complex, I can guarantee you, had something to do with the funding of these projects. Okay? Now, whether it's all of that, or simply, if it's simply a matter of ignorance on their part, whether there's malevolence or intention of doing great evil involved or not, the point that is important here is that your best interests are not at the heart of government, and they are not at the heart of the banking industry, because they look merely at the bottom line. If you haven't learned this already, you should, right? In fact, we know this from the too big to fail scandal, which happened during the 2008 crisis. Okay, where all the banks failed, the 2007-2008 crisis which happened. That was brought about because of the malevolent actions in the name of profiteering. Okay? For the purposes of profiteering, banks purposefully defrauded the taxpayers in the United States, in Great Britain, across Europe, in Canada, and so on. Okay, so we can see time and time and time again instances where people do not behave in the best interests of the public good. And these are the people that will have control of technology. Right? In fact, they already do. And they always have done, by the way. The development of the internet, ARPANET, was where it began. Who was that funded by? The US military and the Department of Defense. Oh, wait a minute, you mean that this platform that we're using today was developed by the military-industrial complex and government? Yes. Now, did they privatize that over time? Sure. But which corporations were allowed to get into the market? Because what happened was, when they rolled it out for the purposes of absolute control. And we'll come back to how this relates to gene editing in a second, but please bear with me. So they rolled this out for the purpose of controlling people, for the purpose of monitoring people, for the purpose specifically of having an absolute view over everyone's lives and eradicating privacy. Okay? And for a short period of time, because there was a mass flux of people who wanted to get in touch with this new technology, there were too many people to monitor, right? And the infrastructure was not in place to do that. And that led to the freedom which existed on the internet. right? That was the first instance of true freedom on the internet. Because it grew out of control, basically, and they couldn't stifle the discussions which were happening, the shitposting which was happening, the everything else that was going on, right? Then eventually they did set up their own infrastructure. This happened in the early 80s, by the way. I'm not talking about recently, but the corporations which were funded by and supported by what is now called the deep state, but in the old sense would have been the shadow government or the military-industrial complex. These firms that were set up like Apple, like Google, like Facebook, like Twitter, were all funded by, were all supported by the military-industrial complex. Okay, and this is an acknowledged fact, by the way. I don't know if people know this. Probably those of you that have been outside the techno loop don't. But the fact of the matter is, this technology that we're using to communicate right now was developed for a reason. And it wasn't so that these platforms would exist where we could have free discussions. It was so the government could know what we're thinking. All the time. Okay? The big nanny state. But getting back on track with the main subject at hand, which is this gene editing CRISPR technology. Consider for a second that if it was used to enhance human beings, okay, if it was used to enhance human beings, then those human beings would develop intellectually and they would develop physically. Okay? If that happened, i.e. if the people became more powerful than government and the global power brokers, well, they would become very quickly a threat to the system, would they not? Do you think that the government would want that, would allow that in any country, be it the US or China? Especially in China with a communist government. No. Of course not. Right? This is all just propagandist nonsense that they're pumping out there. Oh, we're going to use it to make you all healthier and better and superior and more technologically advanced and more intellectually advanced. No. They're not going to do a single thing like that. This I can guarantee you. Okay? And if they do eventually privatize this technology, well, the only corporations that will be allowed into the playground are those corporations that will bow to the will of governments. And we'll see the same things happen again that happened with the internet, that happened with nuclear power, where it was weaponized, okay? That happened with just about every other scientific advance that has been made in human history. Do you see what I'm saying? So this is why this technology represents a threat to human beings, because rather than enhancing us, it's going to be used to de-evolve us. It is going to be used for eugenics. It is going to be used, a proper term for it actually would be dysgenics, to tamper with your genes in such a manner that you become docile and useless. Okay? That is what this technology will actually be used for, despite all the hype and propaganda. Because keep in mind, every time they roll something out like this, right, the propaganda is always the same. Oh, it's going to make your life better. It's going to make you better. It'll eradicate disease. It'll eradicate poverty. These utopian visions, okay, and this is why communists and socialists use these, by the way. These utopian visions are presented to people so that they buy into the lie. Because it sounds good. Okay? Now, if this technology was used to eliminate disease, to eliminate disability, I would be in favor of it. But that could only happen in a truly free market. We do not live under a system where there is a truly free market. Therefore, it is illogical to assume that there isn't an underlying malevolence at work. So that's why I'm skeptical about it, and that's why you should be probably skeptical about it as well. right? But there's a lot of people out there that aren't, right? Well, to further illustrate my point, and as a final point I'll make on this subject, take a look at this mass migration. Okay, why did they import in all these people of low IQs from predominantly low IQ countries who are illiterate? We're not bringing over the best and the brightest from those countries, because there are people like that exist right across the world. We're not trying to attract them into Western society, are we? Why not? Well, because clever people can see through propaganda, and that includes government propaganda. Okay, clever people can see through just about anything, and that makes them a threat, doesn't it? Because they're not going to vote for those people in voting blocks who are a danger to their individuality, who are a danger to their freedom. Because believe it or not, clever people, physically enhanced people, advanced people, don't want to be ruled over. They believe in their own self-sovereignty, right? That's a whole different kind of conversation with regards to that, but there's a reason why that's the case. But this correlation does exist. It's no accident that the Western Enlightenment sparked this desire for freedom, this desire for truth. Higher IQ populations always do. The same thing happened over in India as well. Okay, the same things have happened many times in many civilizations which progressed in certain respects at a certain time. When there was a massive jump in IQ in any population, you found that they wanted to be sovereigns of their own domain, sovereigns of their own individuality, right? They did not want to be ruled over. But if you have a low IQ population, you can rule over them very, very easily. And you can also eradicate people as well. My goodness me, how do you do that? Right? Well, if you were a malevolent individual, what you would do is edit their genes so that they could never ever reproduce. You would make them sterile because they would again represent a threat. Do you see what I'm saying? So this will be used for eugenics, for the purpose of creating people of low intelligence. It will be misused for that purpose, right? It will be misused to not eradicate disease or disability, but to create more diseases and disability. Because the people that will be in charge of this are going to want exactly that. Now, there are some counter-arguments to what I'm saying here, because a lot of people will say, hang on a minute, right? Well, that's not necessarily going to be the case, because Russia and China will be in competition, right? And so therefore, they'll all be trying to develop their first Superman, right? You're an idiot if you think that. Okay, because Russia and China are no longer in competition. They're both dependent on each other's finances. They're both dependent on each other monetarily. And the United States right now has been taken over, whether you like it or not, by communists. At least the infrastructure has. And most of the places in office, the positions of power, have been taken over by people who believe in the communist agenda. Believe it or not, this has already happened. So they'll be singing off the same hymn sheet. Okay? So don't make the mistake or the assumption that this government, whether it's in Great Britain, whether it's in any of the EU countries, whether it's in the United States, that any of these governments are going to really want to enhance humanity, to bring out the best in humanity. Just take a look at the funding programs that are going on right now. There are more programs for socialist, communist, propagandist courses, right? There's more programs, more funding for those than there is for truly legitimate scientific work. You take a look at that, then you tell me, right? Tell me that there isn't an agenda. Right? You're a moron if you don't think there's an agenda happening, that there's an agenda being pursued by these power brokers. You're also a complete idiot, right, if you believe that you should go for this technology when it's offered to you. Not to mention, as an absolutely final thought on this, let me say this, not to mention, you don't know what might happen as a result of genomes being edited. Do you know that even the scientists who have worked on the project have voiced concerns about the fact that genes being edited in these ways might accidentally produce anomalies? And those are real concerns. So I would think twice before jumping to the conclusion that, oh yes, this is fantastic and it's going to be wonderful and it's going to be brilliant. Like with all technology, like with every scientific advancement, there are drawbacks to it as well. Okay? Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Take good care of yourselves and God bless you.